Welcome to the Red Room. Our guest today is Chris Miller, the author of ANKUR, also the owner of Scribe Publishing. Welcome, Chris.
Hello, Chris.
Welcome back. I've interviewed you a few months ago, 6
in
months,
August.
I think. Yeah,
but I opened the interview.
Yeah, it was a written interview. At the time we were interviewing for the blog. There wasn't yet a YouTube channel. Now we're going to talk almost face to face, even though it's virtual. Okay, so since August, there was a Kickstarter for the revised edition. I think that was the main theme of that interview. And meanwhile, you started another project, which is publishing a book that is not yours. Maybe.
So, yeah, you know, the ANKUR was a project. I guess we can go back in time for a minute for some people who aren't aware. You know, that was kind of my baby project. I started almost 10 years ago at this point, and you know, believe it or not, I was actually a medical professional, and I left a very high-paying job to become a game designer. So,
Oh, you're doing this full-time job?
Yeah, I am now.
I didn't know.
Yeah, woes to me for that, but you know. So yeah, I was an optician at the time, and you know, I'm hitting that age where I was having kind of a midlife crisis, I think, and I really wasn't happy at my job, and I was looking, you know, at other options and trying to figure out what I might want to do, and you know, one thing that always really intrigued me and made me happy as a child was you know, fantasy and sci-fi stories, and I even wrote a few short stories back in the 90s and things like that that were published, and so that kind of got me thinking, and I said, well, why don't I try to create my own role-playing game, you know? And I you know, I guess we can go into more detail about how and why I got into the setting that I chose for ANKUR, but essentially, you know, I did a lot of writing and a lot of play testing, and went to a bunch of conventions, and eventually got this thing self-published, and it did really well to my surprise, and you know, it's a bestseller on drive-through and has been for many years, and but the thing was, I wasn't really happy with, you know, it was my first book. I wasn't happy with the way it looked. There were a lot of, you know, spelling errors, and you know, I did the layout myself, and it wasn't that good, and so I wanted to address all these issues and add in, you know, do the rules errata corrections and things like that, and so that's why I did the more recent revised second printing of ANKUR, which was also successful. So thank you to all my fans and backers for that. And you know, I have many other things I would like to do with ANKUR in the near future. The majority of which are setting expansions for the game. You know, the game itself is based on kind of the ancient aliens theory, and the first book is based loosely on Sumerian mythology in particular. I've since come out with an expansion for ancient Africa that also did really well, and it was pretty popular. That book looks much better, I think. You know, well, that's another thing. It looks much better than the original core rules book, and so that's what kind of got me thinking to
so
you know,
you didn't revise that one. You revised just the core book, right?
Right. And so the new projects that I wanted to come out with were other expansions. some of the fan favorites were ideas to do like a kind of a Hollow Earth, setting. People want to see more detail about the aliens themselves and space travel and that sort of a thing, and some of the other regions around the core rule book's starting location, which is Shinar, current day Iraq and Iran. And so what I thought I would do first is detail the northern kingdoms north of Shinar, in the Arata Mountains, around the Black Sea area. This would be like, it would include ancient Samaria, so a very Conan kind of a feel to it as well. And I was really kind of inspired by Frank Frazetta's, fire and ice kind of a concept. And so that project, however, because of the artwork involved and things like that, was going to be very expensive. And I have not had the opportunity, because of COVID restrictions, to go to any conventions for like 2 years. And while I do make a modest amount of money online, my books can be found at not only Drive-Thru RPG, but Barnes & Noble and Amazon and Walmart and that sort of thing. I do make a modest amount of money through that, but the bulk of my income used to come from these conventions, and I would typically spend an entire, weekend at a convention and make, $2,000 or something on average. And if I did that every month, it was a decent amount of money to get back on a what used to be a hobby. It's now full-time, but I'm barely kind of scraping by. So I told myself, I said, before I begin a new ANKUR project, I might want to kind of fish around and see if there were any other artists that, other designers that wanted help publishing their works. That's where RPGPundit comes in, because it just so happens that he is also looking to have someone publish his new book, which we've titled Sword and Caravan. And I looked over the material and was very happy with it. I've always been a fan of history, and Middle Eastern history in particular. And I used to live in India for a while, and so I was always kind of, as a kid, inspired by stories of like Marco Polo and that sort of a thing. And so the Silk Road was really interesting to me, and I looked at it and I liked his stuff. And so I said, well, if you'll let me take a crack at publishing this, I think, it'll work. And so so far, it's about 75% done. I've got the pages laid out. We're in the process of, we've already edited everything. We're in the process of getting appropriate artwork for the book. And I'm actually making most of the maps. And so that's kind of a laborious process right now, because they're obviously being, the Silk Road covers like 3,000 some odd miles, across the Middle East and Asia. And so detailing each of those areas within the chapters, it requires pretty detailed maps. And so I'm working on that. But one of the trials and tribulations I'm having right now is finding appropriate artwork that fits the aesthetic of the book. We've right now the book is kind of taking on this image of more of a medieval illuminated manuscript, and neither of us want the artwork to to be very, high fantasy or your stereotypical, Lord of the Rings kind of a stuff.
Mhm.
So, short of paying someone an exorbitant amount of money to create new stuff, we're going to have to use public domain images as much as possible. And it's kind of hard to find images, that are public domain and match the criteria that we're looking for. We're working on it. I think we're going to do most likely a Kickstarter in the next month or so. I've done several Kickstarters that have all been successful, and although RPG Pundit admittedly has never done a Kickstarter, I'll be the one handling that, and hopefully we'll get that out in the next 2 months. And once I am done with that and get a little bit of residuals, I think I'll start on my next ANKUR project as well.
Have you written something already, or is this something that will start after this?
Yeah, I have notes. I'm a little bit like, I think I write slower than George R. Martin. So, the thing with ANKUR is the core rule book was literally compiled from like cocktail napkins and scrap pieces of paper when I was at work. I'd even be driving and get an idea and dictate something into the phone, So it was my process with that, I haven't started on it because we just came off of the, Kickstarter for the revised copy of ANKUR. And then now I'm fully involved in, RPG Pundit's work. So I think after that, I'll start. But anything creative too, you kind of have to be in the mood for it, and it requires dedicating a lot of time each day too. So we'll see. I don't think it will be that difficult because I do know quite a bit about the region, and I have an idea of where I want it to go. But yeah, it'll probably take 6 months, to write it and get it out on.
Do you plan to cover other regions of the planet?
Yeah. So my original idea was to basically do, Mesoamerica, Asia, like the land of Kitai is essentially China. There's even I wrote a paragraph or so about every place on Earth in the core book. So there's plenty of room to expand. I think once I finish the Northern Kingdoms, that will be, because that takes most of like Eastern Europe. I think that will probably be the last setting I'll do for, say, Europe or Eastern Europe, anything like that. All of Africa was detailed in the last book that I did, called ANKUR, Land of the First People. And so I think if I do anything else, it'll be maybe Hollow Earth, Mesoamerica, Kitai, and then probably something to do with some of the other planets and outer space travel, and like the aliens in my game have bases on both the moon and Mars and that sort of a thing. So
okay, so for the people who don't know the setting quite well, just an overview of the story and the background and what's going on there.
So, as I said, ANKUR is based on primarily the ancient alien or ancient astronaut theory, right? I played D&D, and I was really into Palladium games as well, all of my life. I started playing Dungeons and Dragons, I think, in 1982, and I had a very large, very diverse kind of group of people, that I played with, and many of those people I played with for 20 or 30 years, in a stretch. So when it came time to devise my own game, though, I knew that I didn't want it to be D20. I wanted to do something original. And at first, I didn't know what kind of a setting I wanted to pick. I thought at first maybe it would just be kind of, almost a D&D knockoff. And then I had a friend of mine that turned me on to the Ancient Alien show, which had just aired, at the time. So basically, the setting is based on primarily ancient Sumerian mythology, but really the mythologies of various different cultures around the world, right? And the gist of it is that there are a race of aliens from another planet within our own solar system. This planet is called Nibiru, and Nibiru is on a 3,600 year elliptical orbit around the sun. Now, according to ancient mythology within the ancient Sumerian mythology in particular, our solar system is supposed to have two suns, and there is a light star and a dark star, and the dark star is supposed to be beyond Pluto, which I think is very fascinating too, because the Sumerians knew that Pluto existed. But this planet comes around every 3,600 years, and it gets close enough to Earth that it creates, like ecological upsets. So you get volcanic eruptions and tidal waves and things like that, right? Now this alien race, they live very much longer than we do. They have lifespans that are hundreds of thousands of years old, right? So they're nearly immortal. But that has to do with their planet. The planetary core spins at a different rate than Earth does, and so it creates something I call in the game a chrono field, or like a time distortion that is the reason that they live longer on their world, right? Now, the spin of their core is slowing down, so that's causing the magnetic field around their planet that keeps in the atmosphere to fail, and the atmosphere is leaving. And the ancient Sumerians said that when their planet was close enough to observe, you could see wings of what looked like clouds coming off of the planet. And so I thought that was pretty neat. Well, that's got to be exactly what that is, right? So anyway, as their atmosphere is leaving, their planet is dying, and so they're trying to find a way to save their planet. And they found out that if they take gold and turn it into monoatomic gold, which is like otherwise known as manna, it's a white iridescent powder that has all kinds of electromagnetic properties. If they spread this in the upper atmosphere of their planet, it acts as a shield and keeps the air intact, right? So the problem is, though, that gold is not very plentiful on their world. So they search the solar system and find that it's very abundant on Earth. they travel to Earth and start mining the gold, only to find out that when they stay on Earth for any real length of time, they lose their immortality. They develop a human lifespan of about 100 years. And so this is considered like a death sentence by their workers. And so they have a revolt. The workers aren't too happy with that, and they refuse to work. And the aliens end up creating the human race as a slave race to mine the gold for them. The only problem was that it was a kind of an unforeseen thing that they ended up adding too much of their DNA to the existing hominids on the world, and it created sentience. It gave them free will and that sort of a thing. So you get a little bit of a biblical parallel with Adam and Eve and that sort of a thing, right? You've got other problems with certain groups on Nibiru think that the humans are an abomination. Certain groups want to give the humans their autonomy and don't feel that they should be slaves. And there's some political intrigue involved around both sides of that. Now, about 30,000 years ago, Earth had 2 moons, and one of those moons left orbit. NASA has actually recently confirmed that Earth did in fact have 2 moons at one point in the distant past, but millions of years ago. But I thought it would be cool to add that in. And when the moon left, it created a tidal wave, around the entire world, and that was essentially the ancient flood. The aliens knew this was going to happen a little bit ahead of time, and so they left and just left the humans to their own devices. They figured if they died, they'd make more, right? And when they come back 3,000 years later, the humans didn't all perish, and there are some reasons for that. But they're quite surprised to find out that the humans have been, of course, living on their own for 3,000 years, developed their own languages, their own religions and whatnot, and they don't want to be slaves anymore. So some of the humans accept the new aliens coming back, and they kind of trick them into serving them with civilization and money and beer and entertainment and those kinds of things that the aliens created to kind of subjugate people. But you've also got a fair number of barbarians and even civilized humans that have their own cities that don't want to be really associated with the aliens. And so now the setting is these various types of humanoids who are Earthlings, and they're kind of in a power struggle with the aliens. And not all the aliens are bad, and not all the humans are good, but they're definitely fighting for resources on this planet, and the human race is not actually the dominant race at the time. You've got the Enkidu, who are one of the alien early creations of the aliens that is essentially the Sasquatch, the Yeti. There are the Balu, who are a race of shorter pygmy-like humans. For the most part, the Balu and the Enkidu have become feral since the aliens had left and then now come back. They've spent the last 3,000 years living out in the mountains and in the forests and things like that. But you do have other humanoid races that are more civilized, if you want to say. You've got the Mahdi, who are a cone-headed alien human hybrid race that are very intelligent, and they tend to engage themselves in psionic pursuits and that sort of a thing. You've also got the Gurma, which is my take on Neanderthals. And there's a number of, especially in the new African source book, there is a number of new anthropomorphic races. There are snake people and lizard people, and I've got frog people and different things like that. And so, I would guess that other than, starting out in a city and doing, say your stereotypical city adventure with some politics and intrigue and sewers with ancient cultists living in them, and maybe just trying to destroy the Thieves Guild or something. The main kind of adventure that I think characters are going to have in ANKUR is traveling out into the wilderness and trying to find ancient pre-flood alien cities, and then mining those locations for ancient technology, things like robots or spaceships or laser guns or things like that the aliens had left behind when they knew that the flood was coming and they fled, or they got away. And so, in particular, the human cities that don't necessarily want to be aligned with the aliens are trying to send out, adventurers to, explore these ancient regions that where they might be able to find, weapons or technology that they could use to kind of compete with the aliens.
Are the other races playable or just humans?
Yes, so in the beginning, you could only play humans, Gurma, Mahdi, Balu, and Enkidu. And those were all humanoid, right? I mean, the Yeti is kind of the furthest from a standard human you would be able to play in the original core book. But one of the, I don't know if it's a criticism, but I would say one of the things that a lot of fans kept begging me for was anthropomorphic races. I didn't include those in the original book because, to be honest, I wanted it to be more of a human experience. Like I said before, the humans are not really the dominant species yet on the planet, and I wanted it to be more about their struggle amongst this world with other sentient beings and even aliens that are, obviously more intelligent, more powerful, and that sort of a thing. But, there's a fair amount of people that really wanted to play, essentially a snake person or a naga, or, I've got, half like canine and human crossbreeds and feline races and things like that too. And the way that I come up with the excuse for that is essentially when the aliens first came to the planet and were messing around with genetics, trying to figure out, how to make the perfect, slave for mining the gold. They did a lot of different weird stuff. There's scorpion people, there's cat people and dog people and minotaurs and things like that. And it's because they were playing around with different ideas, and they created a lot of different regional variations. So they found out though that a lot of these more animalistic creatures were maybe not the brightest, a little too emotional, maybe they were a little too ornery and could they were strong enough to fight back if they didn't want to be, whipped into submission and that sort of thing. So I think they eventually abandoned a lot of those ideas and just kind of left them out into the wilderness, especially when they thought the world was going to be flooded and everything was going to be wiped away. But not everything died. So, so that's where you have the bestiary. There are plenty of monsters out there to fight that are all mostly genetic aberrations.
So how do you have what's the explanation when a group of players want to play several races and then mix them together in a party? So those creatures are living in the human cities, or?
Yes, for the most part. Now, like I said, I did I put a fair amount of detail into the backgrounds of each of the different races that you could play, right? Not all of them get along, and some of them integrate really well into the more human society, and some of them don't. So the snake people, which in my game are called the Sarasir, that's what they call themselves. The aliens refer to them as Mushlu, but Mushlu is kind of a derogatory term that just means a serpent man or snake man. And so while they can use that phrase quite often, the Sarasir like to refer to themselves by their own name. Anyway, that race in particular is interesting because they actually predate the arrival of the aliens. They were not created by the aliens. In my game, I have in the background it says that essentially prior to the alien arrival, the world was ruled by a conglomeration of different I don't want to call them dinosaurs, but you've got like lizard men and snake men and some dinosaur-like beings that are now have been destroyed. But when the Chicxulub disaster happened, and you've got an asteroid came and destroyed most of the life on the planet, it really set that culture back. They were almost a star-faring race at the time, and they were wiped almost completely out. So they went back to a Stone Age culture. And so when the aliens arrived some 400,000 years ago, they saw this struggling race of snake people. And at first they thought, well, maybe we can, this is it. This is our answer. We'll use them as the labor. But there weren't enough of them. And the snake race has the Sarasir have very kind of spindly limbs. Their arms are not very strong.
Like T-Rex.
Yes, they have kind of diminutive arms, and so they're not really bred for lifting blocks of stone or mining or anything like that. So, but they did end up making. They did recognize them as a sentient race, and so they made an agreement with them that they would, give them some alien technology and help them kind of pick themselves back up. They could live in the alien cities and have their own amount of autonomy. But what's happened recently, though, is the younger generation of the Sarasir are kind of angry with the aliens because they see that the aliens have taken over the entire world, and these Mushlu have been placed on very small reservations, and yes, they can do what they like on the reservations, but they're not allowed to leave, or or if they stay in the alien cities, they're second-class citizens and that sort of a thing. So the younger generation is beginning to rebel against them, and there's all of these cells of discontented snake youth, that are kind of causing trouble for them. So yes, you can play these anthropomorphic races. They do live in the cities for the most part, but there is a lot written into the like I said, the background and how they interplay with each other. And so as a matter of fact, the Sarasir can be quite racist towards the humans, for example, because they think that Earth belongs to them. They were here first, and these upstart humans are what the ancient Sumerians called Lulu, which are their men, which just means that they were created by man. The aliens look essentially like, by the way. So these are they look at them as beings that have been created as puppets or or playthings of these other greater beings. And so and there's a little bit of like I said, how the Sarasir are even perceived by other races. They can be kind of seen as being stuck on themselves and a little too high and mighty. So
I don't want to make the simple comparison. So they have a little bit of elves. If you want to compare it, because the elves for me, they're always very arrogant and
so they're
think high of themselves.
They're kind of like the elves, but then again, so are the Mahdi. The Mahdi are humans essentially, but they have the highest amount of alien DNA. So they're more like the aliens. So they think they're the superior race, and of course the aliens don't view them that way because they're, so they think that they're on par with the aliens, but the aliens consider them down here. So there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of kind of role-playing opportunities for these connections. And that was a decision I had to make too. I know that especially now it's not very popular to have races in games that have different stats or abilities. Everybody's supposed to be the same, and I know that it's kind of a taboo to even have the idea of slavery in a game. But look, I'm coming from a place of as a historian, it's always existed in every culture. And then also I have to take the mythology that I'm using as the background for the game at face value. The mythology says that the humans were created by these gods as a slave race. I mean, so I'm not going to change that because it's not a popular idea at the time. It's what they said. So I'm just trying to essentially my whole premise with the game is I'm taking ancient mythology at face value. I'm saying, okay, what if everything that they're saying was true? What kind of a setting would that make? What kind of a game would it be? And like I said, I just try to stay true to the mythologies as much as possible and see where it takes me.
Yeah, but if you want to play different races in a game, even D&D, of course you don't. If you're playing a different race, you're supposed to have different stats. What's the point of all being the same? of playing a different race and they're all the same.
Right.
What's the interest in that? Yeah.
I had some. I got into one argument on YouTube with somebody who made the comment that they didn't like what it was like they didn't like the fact that there weren't enough. I don't. They wanted, what was it? It was humans. I think they said, well, they wanted the humans to have more abilities. They wanted more of these different creatures that I developed to be more similar in some way. And I was like, well, but they're not. You know, like you had pointed out, what's the point if everyone kind of has the same abilities? You know, and I tried to balance things as much as possible, but you know, there are distinct disadvantages to some of the species in the game, and there's, you know, there's not everything can be balanced. You know, the Enkidu are very strong. You know, they're going to be stronger than most humans, and humans can't even get their strength to that level. You know, but because I have like a point buy system in the game, you know, you buy your stats with a pool of points. You have to spend, you know, they have requirements. So for an Enkidu, there's a certain requirement for their brawn. Now, to get it to that level, you have to spend that many points, which leaves you less points to spend on things like intellect or, you know, even, you know, your speed or something like that. So that's naturally going to make them a little dim-witted and slow because you have to make them strong. So in that way, I've tried to balance it as much as possible. But yeah, I don't get, you know, in particular, the thing with 5th edition where they want everybody to be super powerful and everybody has access to all the skills and all the spells and anybody can be a spellcaster, and that, you know, it's just not, that's not the game I created. So
yeah, that's a strange thing. So the sources of inspiration for ANKUR were Conan, I suppose, Robert E. Howard in general, and the aliens, the alien race, of
Aliens.
course.
No,
The alien.
I can't do the imitation properly.
yeah, yeah. I mean, growing up, Conan was probably my favorite movie that I'd ever seen. You know, for that and Star Wars. You know, so I watched Conan probably 100 times or more. You know, but yeah, I think if you know, there's a little bit of lots of different things in the game. Like, you know, I was also a big fan of like Buck Rogers and John Carter from Mars. You know, I knew even early on that I wanted to add a little bit of a sci-fi element to the game, even when I thought that it was going to be strictly, you know, like a fantasy game. One of my favorite films was Krull. And I remember seeing Krull for the first time. And, you know, you've got knights on horseback and you've got medieval castles and a princess and all that, you know, the standard fantasy tropes. But then the bad guy is from outer space and, you know, his evil minions shoot laser guns. And, you know, you've got knights in shining armor and laser guns. And so I thought, wow, that just seems to really go together in a way that I liked, you know. And so, you know, I guess you could kind of say ANKUR is like a sandals and ray guns kind of a thing, you know. You can play a barbarian riding a pterodactyl with a laser gun in my game. I mean, so, you know, what more do you need, right? You know, yeah, so it's my inspiration for this game. It was primarily Ancient Aliens, but I think it's really rooted in a lot of nostalgia that I have for, 80s fantasy and sci-fi movies and that kind of a thing too.
They mixed a
Um,
lot also.
mm,
Kinds of technology. Yeah, that's what we were
right.
saying.
Yeah.
Barbarians with red ray guns and all that.
And
And that
when I
was
was a kid, sorry, I had this fascination with the ancient aliens theory because my grandfather had some books that told about all those weird stories and all
oh
those
yeah.
fantastical mysteries, and I read all of those. So yeah, I
Yeah.
love that theory and I love that
It's very
that story.
interesting. Um, it's interesting, and I know I get a little bit of backlash from people that don't believe in aliens, and they say, "Oh, well, this is just trash because it's not real and all this." And I never said it's real.
The
It's
game.
it's a game. I mean, D&D is not real.
Yeah.
Um, and yet nobody criticizes it for any of the gods or monsters that it has in there. So all I'm saying is, I've taken Norse mythology, Mesoamerican mythology, different African mythologies, Sumerian mythology, and I've just taken it for, like I said before, for face value. I said, okay, let me read this myth that the West Africans have about Anansi. It makes for a very good story. Who knows if Anansi was real? Uh, I'm not here to debate, the semantics of some ancient religion or whatever. I'm saying, okay, let's pretend that everything that the Africans believe about Anansi is real, and let's put him in the game. Okay, well, he's got these kind of magical powers, and he lives in this location, and he can do this and that. So I just think I'm looking for things that make good story, and there are a lot of common elements in different mythologies around the world, and I think the more research I've done on this, it actually has made me somewhat of a believer in the ancient aliens theory, because if you so for example, you take the Sumerian language. Every scholar in the world will tell you that it's a dead language. It was only specific to this one time and place. They never used it. It didn't influence any other languages. It's never been used anywhere else. It's dead. And yet, when you look at Native American languages, when you look at Norse languages, Chinese, even things in like the Aboriginals in Australia, and you take common words for mother, father, yes, no, water, food, sky, they're the same, and they all match Sumerian, So I found that it was very interesting, actually, when I was creating the book for Africa. I thought I was going to have to come up with, I was going to have to do all this research, and it was going to be very difficult to come up with names for everything. And I found that 9 times out of 10, if I took the Sumerian word for something and compared it, you put it in Google Translate or whatever, and you compare it to the regional African dialect for that word, it's almost the same, So it was very striking to me. And then also a lot of African religions say that their gods, came from the sky or came from the stars, right? And surprisingly, a, a lot of the ancient African gods are portrayed as having white skin and white hair and blue eyes. And I thought, well, why would an African people create, a god that looked like that instead of looking like themselves? And it wasn't just one tribe; it was, dozens that did this. And it's interesting because the Sumerians also say that the people from Nibiru, well, there were two types of people from Nibiru, and they said that one type had white skin, white hair, and blue eyes, and the other type had dark skin and dark hair. And also, throughout their mythology, there's this almost a yin-yang duality with things. But I found that it was interesting when you read Norse mythology, it's the same thing. You've got the Vanir, who are dark-skinned with dark hair, and the Aesir, who have white skin, white hair, and even there's West African mythologies about these dwarves that came from the stars, and they came to Earth and lived underground in a subterranean city, and they had white skin and white hair and blue eyes that glowed in the dark. And when they describe these people, they say that they had discs that would float in the air that they rode on, and that when they ate, they would have a long table, and there were these metallic hands that would float in the air and pick up utensils and feed, they would feed you. They would bring you cups of ale or, whatever. And so that just sounded really neat. I don't know if it's something they just completely, made up, or,
Yeah, maybe.
or what, but I'll tell you what, having a race of spacefaring dwarves that build a city on Earth and use, they use technology to have floating plates and floating cups and things, that serve you. I mean, that's kind of neat.
Yeah, it's a neat story.
So again, all over the world, there's kind of, if you want to say that, that we may have been visited by otherworldly beings, and a lot of those beings do tend to have the same descriptions, even in Mesoamerica. You've got Quetzalcoatl is described as having white skin and white hair, and a beard. So South American people don't
the indigenous.
So why would they have a statue to a guy with a beard and describe him as being white? It's strange stuff. And I know that I've gotten pushback before about describing some African gods as being white, and they think that that's offensive. And it's like, well, I'm not the one who said it,
Well, they probably found offensive the fact that you, as a white guy, wrote a book about Africa.
Yes, I received a little bit of hate mail about that, particularly on Twitter. And my answer to that is, listen, I researched that book for about a year prior to writing it. I probably know more about certain aspects of ancient African history than most African American people.
For sure.
And here's the thing too. If you want to have more books about Africa, or more games developed that include African characters, there's no one stopping you from writing it. I never quite understood, there's so many African Americans in particular that may complain that there aren't enough books that represent them. And then when I produce a book that represents them, they complain that I created it because I'm white. Well, they didn't create anything. You know, nothing is stopping them from writing their own books, you know, researching their own history. So they can do that. And I didn't come, you know, into that project from a place of, you know, racism or anything like that. I have a great deal of respect, you know, for those cultures and that history, and I'm just representing it in the way that they said it happened, you know. So, like I said, it makes for good story, and it's an interesting setting. Who knows if it was real or not? But yeah, I always kind of, you know, write it in the game as though, you know, it was canon, you know. So
Yeah.
It's kind of strange. The people who complain about those things, they usually value the kind of game that is a revisionist history, and not the games that pick up the real history and try to do something with that, but for example, those games that let's put some black people in I don't know, middle ages or something like that. That's the games they like. That's the games they produce, and not something like that, picking up real history, because there are lots of interesting things in real history and real culture.
well, you're touching on something there that, you know, it's very true. I I don't understand why they want so much to appropriate, you know, Northern European culture, for example, when they have such a interesting and diverse culture themselves. There is no shortage of interesting mythologies and characters and gods and you know, things like that in Africa.
Yeah.
If they did some research and were aware of these things, they wouldn't need to blackwash Lord of the Rings or something like that. You know, they have their own stories that are, you know, just as compelling and just as interesting as Lord of the Rings. They just haven't.
Yeah, but
they're-
probably let's be fair with African Americans, Afro Americans, and they don't have a real connection to Africa, most of them, right? So probably they will identify more easily with American culture and then with North European culture. Probably that it can be the reason, right? I just I just thought about it right now. Maybe that is the reason.
Yeah, that may be true.
Then they don't really understand Africa. And here in Portugal, we have, because we were imperialist pigs until 1970. So 1974, that's when we stopped having colonies. So we have a lot of people that came from Africa, from the colonies. Some of them are still born there, or their parents were born there and they were born here. So they have a stronger connection to Africa. I don't think the African Americans really have that. They have no clue about what Africa really is.
Yeah, they don't even know where they are supposed to have come from, because, well, their ancestors were slaves. So how can they know? Of course.
Well, like actually, I know where most of them came from, and that's, you know, so over 70% of the slaves that arrived in America came from Ghana and Benin, and they were part of the Yoruba tribe. And so, you know, the Yoruba tribe is, I mean, it's very interesting, and I think their artwork is amazing. We used to have there was a store. I live in Georgia, and so in Atlanta, you know, the population is probably majority Black at this point. But even back in the 90s, there was a store called Mutana's, which was an West African store that sold, you know, shea butter and spices and different kinds of clothing and drums and things like that. It was very interesting, you know, to go and visit. And I play the djembe, and so I used to go there on the weekends, and we'd have like an impromptu jam session and play drums and everything. And they had a smoothie bar. Anyway, it was kind of a hangout for me at one point. And they had lots of statues and jewelry and artwork from the Yoruba tribe. And I always thought that it was just very beautiful stuff, very kind people. You know, the owner was very well spoken, and was always very nice to me, even though I'm apparently an evil, colonist. But you know, it's interesting. I don't see much of that anymore. But you know, I did a lot of research even back in the 90s, just about slavery in general. You know, I'm a historical reenactor, and so I used to be a history scholar. I was, you know, I went to college for history and never finished. And then I worked as a substitute teacher at some of the local schools around here, and I've also worked at museums. And I'm going this weekend, as a matter of fact, to work in a museum in Florida. So I talk to people all the time, and one of the things that we focus on is the Revolution and American Civil War. And so while researching about slavery, I found that, like I said, over 70% of the slaves here came from those tribes in Ghana and Benin. And it's interesting because, you know, America only practiced slavery for 87 years. And we fought 2 wars to stop slavery when no one else did, right? So we are the ones that get the most backlash and are considered the most racist. And yet, in my lifetime, I have never seen any kind of, you know, of my white friends or anything like that, you know, discriminate against the black population or anything. I mean, we had a black president, black vice president. You know, our mayor is black. Our governors have been black. You know, it's they're very well accepted in society. Everybody loves their music and their style and clothing and everything. And you know, a lot of our vernacular seems to come from them. So I don't quite get where the oppression is, you know. You know, it's an interesting thing. And I think, you know, I lived in South America for a little while too. When I was younger, my parents were missionaries. And I never saw, you know, we didn't have like a BLM or a Ku Klux Klan or anything like that in South America. Yet South America practiced slavery until, what was it, like the 1890s or 1900 or something. So they, you know, how can one place practice slavery and it was more brutal too for a long period of time and not have any kind of backlash for that? And yet I feel that we only practice it for a small amount of time, and you know, now the blacks in our country are have every right that anyone else does. You know, everyone's equal. But anyway, I don't want to go on this huge tangent, but it is interesting, you know, to see that you know, they have a lot of you know, issues, like you said, with anyone that's not of a darker skin color writing a book that may feature them, even if it's in a good light. You know, obviously I didn't write anything bad about them.
Of course. But did you had the hate mostly from black people, or you also had from white? 'Cause that's even better when you have white people being outraged.
Well, again, you know, and on Twitter, it's kind of hard to tell because everyone uses everyone looks like an anime figure, yeah, I don't know. That's another very interesting thing. We have a huge population of very privileged left-wing students, mostly in this country, that I don't know what they see. Well, I guess I do to an extent. I was young once too, right? And up until just a few years ago, I was a very liberal person. I was a Democrat, and I was always fighting for I basically socialism and even communism, and I thought once that we were, I guess, evil imperialists at one point too. And then I grew up and I got a job and had to pay taxes. And then I saw different places in the world and talked to a lot of different people. And my worldview changed, And I think, I heard somebody say once, and I'm going to butcher this, I'm sure. There's not a person under 20 that doesn't think, well, gosh, oh man, I can't think of now. It's something along the lines of, not a person under the age of 20 that, with a heart that wouldn't vote, Democrat, but there's not a person over 40 without with a brain that would not vote Republican. So there's something to be said there with age comes wisdom, and I think that's the problem too. They even want to lower the voting age in this country to 16. And I'm like, there are 30-year-olds that don't know anything about politics.
You guys are not old enough to drink when you're 16, so you shouldn't be old enough to vote.
So I don't know. We're obviously in a very turbulent time right now, and there's a lot of change and a lot of things in the air that I think some of the younger people are excited about the prospect of change without knowing really what that change is going to cause for them, I know from experience, I've lived in third world countries. I've lived in socialist countries. I grew up during the Cold War with Russia, and I'm very suspicious of communism and of China and things like that. I know about Pol Pot and Stalin and Che Guevara, and it's so crazy to see, like a young gay teenager wearing a Che Guevara shirt when Che Guevara massacred gay people.
Wasn't that common before? Because here in Portugal, it was a common thing, having the Che Guevara t-shirts.
Right, yeah. Right. And I even saw in the news, it was about a year or two ago, they had a women's, lesbian march for feminism in Washington. And these lesbian feminists are carrying signs demanding that America go to Sharia law.
And I thought, I don't think they know what that means.
That's strange, really.
Do you know that in Sharia law, lesbians will be killed, and there are no feminists, because if a woman even learns how to read a book, she'll be stoned to death, so.
That is very strange. Yeah, that is very strange.
Yes, why there's so many.
I think that, and I was born in 82. You said you started playing in 82, so I was born in 82. So some of those people are still on my generation. And I think maybe we had life too easy. We didn't saw any war. We didn't see the Cold War. So maybe we are too comfortable, so we want to make revolutions, but from our couch.
I also have the feeling that there was some problem there because, well, your generation, which is my generation, even if you are 1 or 2 years older than I am, I'm not sure if you are. No, probably not. I just started playing later. I started in '89, but I was 16 by then. So
Yeah, I'm almost 50. It's
yeah, I'm 46. So
terrible. You know.
but in the '90s, at least, well, here, probably people didn't weren't preoccupied with not having causes to fight for. Well, there were still
There was
causes, but
the hunger in Africa and stuff like that,
yeah,
so they could fight
save
for
the
that.
whales and
Yeah.
save the whales, save the planet, save the ecology, something like that. But well, okay, we weren't obsessed with that. People, we had interests with did things with life, and we like music and movies and whatever. But we weren't obsessed with causes. Right now, it seems that kids, at least on Twitter, I don't know, are obsessed with causes and all
Yeah.
that things. Causes that
Well,
don't have any meaning sometimes.
but see, a lot of I'm all for. See, the causes sound great.
Yeah,
You know, okay, they say they want to save the planet. What? Who could argue with that? Who doesn't want the planet to be, you know, healthy and you know, for the animals to, you know, to prosper and the, you know, plants to grow and there to be clean air and all that, right? Everybody wants that. So how are they going to get there? Well, they come up with the stupidest ideas. Like, okay, so there was a video circulating, you know, a few years ago of the poor sea turtle, right? The sea turtle with the straw stuck in its nose. And they pulled the straw out and it's bleeding and it's crying. You can see it crying. And people are like, oh, these heartless, you know, and mostly, I don't know why they direct it always at us, but you know, these Americans and their wasteful society, they eat and throw things, throw their trash everywhere. And I'm sure, you know, so the whole country goes through this, you know, issue of banning straws for drinks. So you go to a restaurant and you can't get a straw for a drink now, you know.
We have paper straws and they're the worst. And it's plastified paper, so it's pollution, we pollute it anyway.
The paper dissolves halfway through the drink. Well, here's the problem with that. America doesn't dump its trash in the ocean. Yes, we make a lot of straws, but those straws do not ever end up in the ocean. They're either incinerated or they go to landfills. 90% of the trash that's in the ocean, and there's a lot of it actually, off the coast of California, there's a floating island of trash. That trash does not come from California. It comes from Asia.
Mm-hmm.
And so China, for example, dumps all of its trash into the Yangtze River and just straight on out into the ocean. India does the same thing. So why is it then that, you know, they have these economic summits and everything, and they want to put restrictions on America and tell us that we have to pay more money because the amount of straws that we consume is, you know, more than every other country or something. And so, you know, we're the ones who suffer and go through these you know, regulations or whatever, and we're not the one causing the problem, you know. The same thing with, okay, they want everyone to go to an electric car. You know, the gas is killing the, you know, the atmosphere and causing, you know, the snow to melt, even though it's not. There's actually science data that says that you know, the poles are getting colder. But anyway, so they want everyone to go to an electric car. The problem is electric cars run on either batteries or you have to plug them in, and they only go for 100 miles before you have to plug them in again, right? These plugs simply, if you follow the extension cord, it goes to a coal plant that
Mhm.
burns fossil fuel to power the generator to make the electricity.
And then you
So
have the lithium batteries that people
then there's
also
lithium batteries,
complaining about
and
the lithium exploration.
right.
So how do you want to have electric cars?
And now you got 5-year-old children in Africa, you know, digging lithium for your car batteries. It's ridiculous. So, I just don't understand some of their. They want too much too soon, and they don't think about the repercussions.
Where is the real problem? Yeah, because it's on the third world countries. Europe and North America are more or less regulated, highly regulated.
Right.
So
Well, while I think everyone, my enemies included, would love to hear more about my political views.
Yeah.
We should probably
So let's go back to games.
go back on track. Yeah.
so you didn't mention yet the system. I know it's a D12 system, right?
Yeah. So, wow, that's an interesting story too. Yes, it is a D12 system. The D12 is a very underused
Mhm.
die in gaming for sure. So originally it was going, this is when I came up with the idea for the game. This was back when Dungeons and Dragons had just come up for open license, right? So the D20 system was open game for anyone who wanted to use it in their system. I started developing it as a D20 system, but again, I didn't like the way that it was working, because I actually found that in designing a game, I didn't like all the flaws that I found in the D20 system. And every time I tried to make a house rule or change something, it was a bit like, you ever play that game Jenga? Right? So you have a bunch of blocks stacked on each other, and the game is you have to remove a block
Mhm.
without it falling, right?
Yeah.
And you keep going until it falls over. Well, I found out that every time I took something out, the game just became very unstable. And I was very frustrated by it. And I finally decided, I said, I'm going to have to come up with my own original system. It's the only way I'm going to be happy. I wasn't prepared at the time to do that much work, but I said, okay, I'm just going to go all in. I'll come up with my own thing. And I went through, trying to use the D20 in just a different way. I tried 2D10. I tried dice pools and D6s and things like that. And I didn't like any of them, enough to really say, okay, this is what I'm going to go with. And I started reading more into Sumerian mythology, and I got interested in one aspect of their religion kind of centers around numerology. And the Sumerians considered the number 12 to be a sacred number. And I don't know, it just kind of clicked. I said, well, I haven't tried a D12 yet. And at the same time that I decided I might go with a D12, I also decided that the method that I was kind of using, where, I'm trying to choose a difficulty number and roll high, that wasn't going to work with a D12 so well. And then I said, okay, well, maybe I should look at the stat block. And instead of rolling stats the way that they do in Dungeons and Dragons, I simplified it, because I looked at it, I said, okay, here you have this stat range in D&D. Let's say you look at your strength. It can be anywhere from a 1 to an 18. Now, those numbers don't mean much of anything, because you get a bonus for you know, like a +1 through a +5 for numbers that are between 14 and 18, right? Something like that. Depends on the addition you're using. Usually it goes to from +1 to +4. I think if you go up to a 20 strength or something, you get a +5, whatever. And said, well, everything below that is just considered average. Why do I need such a large range of average numbers that don't give you any bonus or penalty? And then, you know, I said the only numbers that really matter are the top 5. So I changed my stats to just be from 1 to 5. 1 is below average and a 5 is, you know, godlike valor. So then I decided, instead of having a standard kind of a difficulty number like you would have in Dungeons and Dragons, right? I wanted to have kind of a skill-based system. And so I said, all right, what I'll do is I'll have skill levels, not character class levels. And then you take your stat, which is 1 through 5, and your skill level, which can be 1 through 9. You add that together, and that's your target number. But instead of rolling that or higher, you need to roll that or less on a D12, because obviously using a 12-sided die, you know, if you have a stat and skill and some bonuses, and it adds up to a 20, you know, it's not going to work on the D12. So rolling under seemed to work really well. And I said, well, how am I going to do crits, you know? And I thought, well, why don't we do this? A crit will be the highest number that you can roll and still be under you know, your D12 range, right? So it'll still be under your target number. So if you had, for example, a strength of a 3 and a sword skill of a 3, your target number, or your what I call an action potential number, or an APN, is going to be a 6. So when you roll a D12, if you roll an exact 6, that's a crit. If you roll less than a 6, it's a success, but it's just a normal, you know, success. If you roll a 1, it's always a success, but never a critical success. And that keeps people from, let's say you have, you know, the worst strength in the world, and you've also got the worst sword skill in the world, and the only thing you can roll is a 1. You know, let's say you don't even have a sword skill and you're wrestling something. You got a 1 strength. I don't want somebody to crit every time that they hit.
Yeah.
You know, especially if they're a novice. So you can never crit on a 1. Now, if you roll above your APN, so above that 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, what have you, that's a failure. And if you roll a 12, it's always a critical failure. Now, you can, in some circumstances, obviously if you do a little bit of math, right? So if you have a skill level that can go up to a 9, and then you have a stat block that can go up to a 5, you obviously can go higher than a 12. If that happens, the way you resolve that is there's like in the book, I've got this, even there's a graphic for it. It's a number scale, okay? And you've got the, you know, the 1 through 11, which can be your potential success range. 12 is always a failure. That's off the table. So if you have something like a skill of a 4, a stat of a 4, so that would make an 8, and you've got a bonus from something that would give you a +6, you know, so your range then would be, let's say your target number is a 14. Well, you can't go, you can't have a successful number above 11. So then you count backwards. the overage amount, right? So that would be, you know, like 3 points. And so you would count back from 11. So anything from an 8, 9, 10, or 11 would then be your crit range. Okay, so it just, having something higher than 11 just extends your crit range. You count backwards from 11. And so anything in that range now would be a crit.
So that way you'll have a bonus for someone that has something, a stat higher than 12.
Yeah, yeah. So if you, you know, if you've, and it's very rare that you're going to get a very high bonus like a 6 or something, but I'm just saying, you know, it could accommodate something up to a 20, because you can count all the way back down to 1 again, you know, and just say that, well, everything, you know, a 1 is a success, but never a crit, and a 2 through 11 would then be your crit. So I like that, because having the APN, or the action potential number, be on a sliding scale like that, every character is going to have a different target number. So you're not always trying to get that 20, but everybody still has the exact same, you know, 1 in 12 chance of getting that hit, or that crit rather, right? Well, even a regular hit. And everybody still has the same exact chance of failure as well. And so I think it works out really well, even though I was never great at math, you know, but I was very pleased with myself when I came up with that. And it's been play tested a lot, and it seems to work well. And I haven't really had any issues with it. I think the few people that have been critical of it, I've had a couple of you know, bad reviews and that sort of thing based on the mechanic, but and I think that's only happened twice. But in both cases, the people did not read the chapter on the mechanics. They just saw the overview and knew that it was, you know, a D12, and automatically assumed, oh, well, that's not a high enough range, or that's not a large enough, you know, that's not a large enough stat range. And, you know, they're just so used to the, you know, used to the D&D way of doing things. I had some people not like the fact that that you have to roll low, which, you know, who cares? You know, I think it's, to me, it feels a little more natural to have this range where you want to roll that target number or less than it does necessarily to roll high.
It's basically the same. People are just used to do it one way. In the end, yeah.
Everybody, you know, because the game's been out a long time now. It's been out almost, I'd say officially, I think I published it like 8 years ago, maybe. So it's been play tested a lot, and the people that have you know, regular game sessions of it, that, you know, that talk to me, you know, they love it, and they say that after you get started, it's actually so much simpler than Dungeons and Dragons, for example, because, you know, I mean, look, with D&D, you've got 40 some odd years worth of rules that have just built this mountain of convoluted, you know, mechanics that, you know, some of the rules kind of exist, you know, just to try to fix other problems that they have in the system, that it just snowballs into this larger problem, you know. And I tried to make my system kind of rules light. Now, RPGPundit told me that he doesn't believe it's rules light because my rule book is like, you know, 350 pages. So I can kind of see that, but I think that because I only have a couple of mechanics that are universal throughout the game, and then with combat, the combat chapter has a lot of well, what am I looking for? Like, you know, the rules that aren't written in stone. It's a very piecemeal system. So you can kind of pick and choose things and say, okay, well, I don't really want to bother tracking, you know, this kind of a thing during combat. I'll leave that out. But I really like this aspect, these bonuses that you get with the different martial arts. So I'll take that, you know, and so you can kind of build your own game out of it, you know, and kind of choose what you want to use and what you don't. You know, nothing in there is so integral to the game that it you know, it can't be disposed of, with the exception of the main mechanic.
Yeah, of course.
Didn't you think at a certain point when the OSR movement started to grow that maybe you should have used the D20?
Yeah, isn't that funny? So right after I, you know, put all my chips in, right, and I decided to make my own game, and I spent a ton of money, not all of it wisely either, right? You know, I spent about $20,000 trying to get the game, you know, just to pay for the artwork, to get the game published, to get all the you know, the original copies of the book that I had that I then took to conventions and this and that and the other. A lot of the conventions, for those of you who don't know, you know, for vendors are very expensive as well. You know, if you go to something like Gen Con or Origins, you're going to spend $5,000 or $10,000 just on an adequate booth space. You know, $5,000 was about as much as I could afford at any one time for that. And so I spent a ton of money, you know, getting this thing together. And then I found out that there was something called the OSR, you know, and that and it was becoming more popular. And I was like, what, you mean there's still people that play first edition? That's great, you know, but yeah, I wish I'd kind of gotten in on that bandwagon. To be honest, I've been kicking around the idea of making my own OSR system, you know, too. Just making my own setting for D&D, and kind of, you know, like they've got white hack and black hack, and that sort of a thing, which both use a roll under system, just like my D12, right? They use a D20. So I thought, well, isn't that interesting? I hope they didn't steal that from me. But anyway, seeing the success of both of those, I thought, well, I could do that. So I don't know. That's another thing that's on the back burner that I might do. But on the flip side, I think possibly there's too many OSR games out right now.
Probably.
You know, there's only so many ways that you can rehash the same system. So I don't know. Maybe I'll just do a set of adventures or something instead and see how that goes. But
Are you going back to conventions this year?
Well, so far, every convention that I have approached, you know, there was trying to think of course, MomoCon, DragonCon. Those are two big ones, two of the largest conventions in the country that just so happen to be located here in Atlanta. So I'm very thankful to have a hub, you know, a huge hub of gaming, love for gaming here. But and there were a couple of other smaller ones that I looked at, and so far everyone requires you to get the vaccine before you can attend. They also want you to wear the mask the entire time, and I'm just not going to do either of those things. So you know, I'm waiting for this whole COVID thing to blow over, and
Probably next year.
Yeah, much to my chagrin, you know, of course, you know, I believed them when they said 15 days to slow the curve, right? and it's been going on 3 years now. So who knows? The FDA is now saying that the government here is in talks with keeping the lockdown in place for an indefinite period of time, and they want the vaccines to be a recurring thing that will go on for at least 10 years. I sure hope not, because if that's the case, I probably won't go to any conventions ever again. And I may just have to focus on internet sales or something like that. I'm not in particular against vaccinations as a whole. I don't want people to get that idea. What a lot of people don't know is I actually was a bubble boy. And for those of you who don't know what that means, when I was born, I was allergic to planet Earth. And so I was allergic to everything, from human skin, human hair, cotton, chocolate, rice. I was allergic to every food, every kind of clothing, anything like that. So I spent a large portion of my childhood living in a plastic bubble in the hospital. Matter of fact, back in the 70s, our then president, Jimmy Carter, came to visit me, and I was in the newspaper and that sort of a thing. After many years and lots of my own vaccinations, I was able to leave the hospital and walk around like a regular person. So I get it, right? I know the value of vaccines and things like that, but they used to do things a lot different than they do now. And I'm not really jazzed about the contents of these vaccines, particularly for COVID. I'm also not happy about the fact that there's like a 10% chance that you can have a stroke or a heart attack or just fall over dead within several days of getting the vaccine. I am a believer in herd immunity too. So, I've had COVID 4 times now. So I believe that my personal immunity to COVID has to be just as strong as if I had gotten a vaccine. And the funny thing is, I know people are going to say, oh, well, you probably got COVID 4 times because you did not get the vaccine. I contracted COVID each of those 4 times from 2 different individuals who have had all 3 of the shots and wear double masks. Both of these people are in my gaming group, and we still meet occasionally to play games. And people can wear masks at my house if they want. I don't care about that. I don't care to wear a mask because I have asthma, and I also get a little anxiety when I have something like that over my face, and so I just won't wear one. Now, for the last 2 years, I've pretty much stayed in my house, and I order stuff from Amazon, and I don't go out often. Yep. So I'm respectful of other people, but I expect that kind of respect in turn. So anyway, these people who wear masks and have gotten all the vaccinations came to my house and gave me COVID. So again, that's proof to me that your shots aren't working, your masks aren't working, and so I just choose not to do that, And so if there's, if the conventions are going to continue with this nonsense that all guests must get a vaccination before they can
Probably
attend.
less people will go, at least this year. So maybe your even if you decided to go, your investments wouldn't be worth
Yeah.
it, right?
Well, that's true as well. So Dragon Con and MomoCon both suffered huge losses this last year and expect to suffer losses again this year. The attendance, from what I understand, was capped. So they normally they have like 85,000 people at Dragon Con, and I think they capped it. And well, don't quote me on this, but I think it was like 30,000 people or something. So as a vendor, I've been a vendor at Dragon Con before. I know the setup, and they have this. They have their own convention center that they've got set up just for vendors, and it's got 4 levels. If you're on top, which I would always be, because you get grandfathered in, right? So the people on the bottom level, that have the most access to the convention goers, they're people who have in the past purchased tables, and then they're automatically grandfathered in for the next year. New vendors get pushed higher and higher up. And so traffic on level 4 was abysmal, even before COVID, so I can imagine if you're down to 20 or 30,000 people, you may not make the money that would cover the table, because you're paying thousands of dollars to be there, so you've got to make that money back and extra to make it worth going. And again, with me not, it's a catch-22, because I don't go to conventions, I'm not making a lot of money. If I don't have a lot of money, I can't pay for the table space at the convention. So, I'm always looking at better ways to promote myself online. I do have a Twitter account. I don't use it much because of all the harassment and just the bad attitudes that go on there. I'm fairly active on Facebook. Well, not me personally, because I've been banned from Facebook. I've been banned for 200 years.
Is that possible?
I'm not allowed to. What gets me is Facebook has the balls to assume that they're going to be around for 200 years. Maybe their metaverse will exist forever. I don't. But so I'm not allowed to have a personal page. But Mad Scribe Games does have a Facebook page. I also have an older pre-existing page for ANKUR Kingdom of the Gods. I've been trying to get people to leave that page and go to the Mad Scribe Games, just because it's a little too much to keep 2 pages going.
Yeah.
I at one time had 6 pages for various different hobbies and things, but they all got shut down when I was banned. So, I'm looking at different ways to use Facebook and drive through and Kickstarter and things like that to generate a more stable income without the conventions. I've had some success with that. Just before COVID hit, I had gotten my algorithm down using Facebook ads and things like that, and I was generating a pretty good income, a sustainable income, and I was on a regular basis. I was spending thousands of dollars a month on advertising through Facebook, but it was generating me twice that back, so it was worth doing. But once I got banned, and I lost, 5,000 followers and, lost my page and, the algorithm is non-existent now. And of course they've changed their rules on all that stuff. It happens so often anyway, but I haven't really gotten back into the swing of things with advertising with them. But I don't know. We'll see what the future holds. I certainly hope that the world comes back to its senses here soon and we can all enjoy conventions again. I think it's interesting that in the past, a lot of people got sick at conventions and we always referred to it as the con crud. It seemed like it was a running joke, but everybody would go to these conventions for a week or whatever and come back and get sick, and nobody got vaccines back then. Nobody wore masks. Nobody, half the attendees.
Gaming with a mask, it's I've never tried it, but I suppose it's probably a problem, right? It's we're
Right.
speaking all the time with that thing on. No,
Although
I don't think so.
In hindsight, the mask is probably the least of our worries, though. With that, I mean, there's quite a few people at these conventions that don't bathe on a regular basis.
Yeah.
But like I said, I personally don't. I just don't like something covering my face all the time.
I only use it when I have to go to supermarket or something, and I avoid it most as possible because I start feeling really sick when I'm with it too. I feel short of air and I start sweating all over. It's awful.
And it's been proven that when you're breathing in you're just constantly breathing in your CO2 like that, it can cause you to faint, So I pity the people that work, 8 or 10 hour jobs.
Yeah.
They say they get used to it. I can't imagine it.
And I got to tell you, I went to the grocery store the other day and of course the cashier is wearing a mask and I can't understand anything they're saying. They are asking me some kind of question about, do I want something or did I find everything okay or whatever, but all I hear is and I hate having to ask people to repeat themselves over and over.
Yeah, and they don't understand you back. I don't know. Do you have to wear masks there to go to shops? Because here we have to.
Well, so in the state of Georgia, we're in a very kind of weird position because our current governor is a Republican and a Trump supporter, and he's very he's kind of, well, he's on the fence, right? He wants to be anti-mask, but he also doesn't want to be canceled. So whenever he talks about it on the news, he's very wishy-washy about it, right? And he doesn't want to outright say it. So he basically leaves the mask issue up to individual cities. And even within that, like my city says that you don't have to wear a mask, but the individual businesses say that you do, right? So like the city I live in doesn't require a mask, but if I want to go to Walmart, they have people at the door that will stop you and tell you, no, you have to wear a mask. You can't come in. And I said, well, who said so? My state says I don't have to wear a mask. The government doesn't have a universal mask mandate. Who says I have to? So, oh, well, the manager. I said, well, I don't work. So a lot of times I just, sometimes I'll go and I'll just ignore them and walk past. I do have a mask and I do wear it occasionally. If they start to, cause a lot of problems, I don't want to get kicked out of a store or end up on a YouTube video somewhere.
Yeah, being the
but,
crazy old man, crazy white old man.
but you know, a lot of times I just avoid it by not going anywhere.
Mhm.
You know, I have because I've been working from home for a long time anyway. Uh,
Yeah.
kind of used to staying here and spending my life on the computer, so
Yeah.
you know.
Okay, well, I think it's time to wrap this up.
Yes.
Well, anyway, good luck with that, because maybe next year, 2023, you can go back to the conventions.
Maybe we can all go back to normal.
Yeah,
Well,
I think around here it's starting to look normal right now. Not completely, but a little bit.
I think the truckers up in Canada have you know, maybe sparked something. You know, now they're talking about having a caravan of trucks, you know, blockade Washington D.C.
Mhm.
And so even just the fear of that has already made even the leftists in the government, they're starting to say on television that maybe these mask mandates are a little too much. You know, maybe we don't need to continue this lockdown. You know, so we'll see what happens. I think they're beginning to see that there's only so long that the people will put up with
Mhm.
the restrictions, you know.
Yeah.
At some point, you just got to say, listen, you know, COVID's just, it's a flu. We're going
Yeah.
to have to deal with it just like the common cold. We're going to, you know.
Yeah, we're gonna have to live
Live
with
with
it.
it. Yeah.
And people are already saying, "Oh, we're gonna have to live with it forever, but
Yeah.
we have to use masks and we have to." Yeah, but it's a flu.
Yeah, yeah. I think we've, you know,
Yeah,
we've
let's
talked
close the
enough about
subject.
that. You
Yeah,
know my opinion on it, but yeah,
yeah. I agree with you. I don't mind being on record
never,
saying that. So
we never had to wear masks or close the country down for the flu,
Yeah.
right? You know, the common cold, even according to the CDC, the common cold is 6 times more deadly than COVID. Well, if COVID is so much less deadly than the regular flu, we never did that before.
Yeah.
Why are we doing it now for a lesser problem? It makes no sense.
Yeah.
Never does. Okay. Thank you for coming,
and
Thank
and
you for
see,
having
good luck for your next projects.
Well, thank
And
you very much. So look for you know, look for Sword and Caravan.
yeah, we'll be waiting for that one.
Coming out sometime in the next couple of months, barring any further problems, and then you know, soon after that, I think I'll start working on you know, like I said, some more ANKUR products.
yeah, great.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Bye, Chris.
Bye bye.